People say time heals everything, but no one tells you how painful the first week feels after losing your mother. Every morning, I woke up hoping it had all been a terrible dream. Then reality would hit me all over again. My mother was gone. Just 1 year earlier, we had buried my father, and now we were standing in the same cemetery, trying to understand how we had become orphans. My name is Lindiwe Makize. I am the youngest of 4 siblings. I have 2 older sisters, Namusa and Zanale, and 1 older brother, Sifo. People often say the youngest child is spoiled. Maybe that is true in some families, but after losing both of my parents, I did not feel spoiled. I felt empty. Standing there that morning, I believed them. I believed that nothing could ever separate us. I had no idea that a few months later, I would walk away from the family that loved me for a man I barely knew. After the funeral, I continued living in my father's house. Every room carried a memory. My mother's favorite cup was still in the kitchen cupboard. My father's jacket still hung behind his bedroom door. Some evenings, I sat in his chair and imagined that he would walk through the front door again. At the time, I worked as a receptionist at a busy medical practice. My salary was not big, but I was responsible with it. I paid my bills on time. I helped with groceries. I also spoiled my nieces whenever I could. I was not wealthy, but I had peace. And looking back now, peace was more valuable than anything Sibusiso later promised me. I had returned to work only 2 weeks after my mother's funeral. I needed the distraction. At work, I smiled at everyone, answered calls, booked appointments, and acted as though I was coping. But whenever the office became quiet, grief found me again. One afternoon, my manager, Mama Grace, noticed me staring at my phone and gently reminded me that I did not always have to be strong. I smiled, but I did not answer. The truth was, I was lonely. I missed having someone who checked on me, asked whether I had eaten, and made me feel protected. That was the space Sibusiso entered. We reached for the same loaf of bread at the supermarket. When he apologized and offered it to me, I told him there were more on the shelf. He smiled and admitted he was actually just trying to find a reason to speak to me. His name was Sibusiso, and he told me he taught at a high school nearby. He was charming, well-spoken, and looked responsible. Everyone respected teachers. Before we parted ways, he asked for my number. Normally, I would have refused, but something about him made me feel safe. Or perhaps I was simply desperate to feel loved again. Sibusiso became part of my life very quickly. He called me every morning to ask if I had slept well, brought me lunch at work, held my hand as we walked, and listened patiently as I talked about my parents. He told me I had carried so much pain alone, and that I did not have to do that anymore because he was there. Those words touched the emptiest part of me. For the first time since losing my parents, I felt seen. He spoke of marriage, children, and building a future together, and I believed him. When I told my family about him, they asked how long I had known him, whether I had met his family, and if I knew his friends. When I admitted I had only known him for 6 months and had not yet met his relatives, they urged me not to rush. They reminded me that I was still grieving. At the time, their concern felt like jealousy. I thought they just did not want me to be happy. So when Sibusiso suggested that we move in together, I readily agreed. I left my father's house believing I was beginning a beautiful new chapter. I left my sisters, my brother, my nieces, and the only home that had ever made me feel safe. I did not know I was walking into a life built on lies. The first few months were beautiful as we shared rent, bought groceries, and watched movies. Then one afternoon, while Sibusiso was in the shower, his phone rang. The screen displayed Thando's mother. When I answered, a woman demanded to know why Sibusiso had not fetched his 8-year-old son for the weekend as promised. When Sibusiso walked out, he confessed that he had a son and had hidden it because he was scared I would leave him. He cried and apologized, and because I loved him, I forgave him. A few weeks later, I discovered he did not have just 1 child, but 2. That should have been my cue to leave, but he had already taught me to doubt my own judgment. When Sibusiso claimed he needed a car for work because his credit record was poor, he persuaded me to register the vehicle in my name, promising he would cover every installment. I wanted to prove I trusted him, so I signed the papers. At first, he paid. Then the excuses started. Soon, I was paying the rent alone, buying all the groceries, covering the electricity, and paying the car installments. I even had to remind him to send money to the children he had hidden from me. Yet whenever I brought it up, he accused me of treating him like a child or involving myself in things that did not concern me, managing to make every single problem my fault. After another night of him returning home close to midnight, I told him I was tired of carrying everything while he lived like a single man. When he told me to find another partner, I quietly decided I was leaving. I started saving money and stopped arguing. Noticing the change, the old Sibusiso suddenly returned with flowers, early homecomings, and apologies. I wanted to believe him. A few weeks later, I discovered I was pregnant. I knew the timing was wrong and the relationship was broken, but I loved my baby instantly. Sibusiso smiled and promised everything would change. Nothing changed. I struggled through my pregnancy entirely alone, attending appointments, buying baby clothes, and preparing the nursery by myself, while Sibusiso stayed out late with friends. When I begged him for help because the doctor ordered me to rest, he dismissed me by claiming he had a long day at school too. I cried myself to sleep many nights, missing my sisters and my father's house, but shame kept me away because I had defended him so fiercely. Then my daughter was born. The moment I held her, I realized she was watching me, and I had to decide what kind of love I wanted her to believe was normal. One morning, while Sibusiso was away, I packed my clothes, took my baby, and returned to my father's house. I was terrified of admitting that the life I defended had broken me, but my family did not judge me or say they told me so. They helped me care for my daughter and helped me rest, and slowly, I began finding the woman I had lost. When Sibusiso tracked me down weeks later to claim his life was falling apart without the apartment and the car, I told him he only came back because his life was difficult, not because he understood his actions. When he begged for another chance and invoked our child, I told him he could be a responsible father if he chose, but he would never use her to trap me again. Choosing peace, I walked away. I left my father's house for love and returned with a baby and a broken heart. For a long time, I believed returning home meant I had failed, but sometimes going back is not failure. It is survival, and the first step toward finding yourself again. I learned that love should not leave you carrying every burden alone, require you to ignore lies, make you afraid to speak, or cost you your peace, dignity, and identity. I do not regret my daughter, for she became the reason I found the courage to leave. Today, I am still rebuilding my life, paying off the debts left in my name, and learning to forgive myself. Sibusiso did not destroy my life. He exposed the parts of me that still needed healing. The woman who left this house believed she needed a man to feel complete. The woman who returned finally understood that she had always been enough. If you've watched this video until the end, please like, share, and leave a comment below. Your support helps Lee Life Tales reach more people and share more meaningful stories. And remember, every life has a story, and every story has a lesson.